people will always remember where they were, you know, for the World Meeting of Families
they will.
in 2015. It's one of those things that you'll always remember.
Father Dan, you know, of course, the Pope, as we have talked about numerous times, the immigrant community is a very, very important community to him. All communities are, but this is something that is near and dear to his heart. And what was so neat for me, I did a story with a Vietnamese family that this visit meant so much to them, because he was talking about how he knows people that Pope Francis's visit, Pope Francis as the leader of the Catholic Church, has brought people back into the faith. And in the Archdiocese, it's very diverse. 20 languages spoken. So Mass is celebrated in 20 languages across Philadelphia. Just amazing, Father Dan.
Yeah, and I don't think the full Catholic community understands how diverse the church is and what the impact that has had on us, because it's a very quiet part of the church, and yet it's the growing and really the lively part of the church. But I think you're right, that event at Independence Hall where he addressed the issue of immigration, I think that's where you saw him at his best. And at an issue that is, as you said, Lucy, very close to his heart. And I think he made it very clear he didn't want to come as though he's sort of pounding us over the head with our responsibility, as much as he's challenging us gently to reimagine this. As I think he did at the prison too. Let's reimagine the prison system, and let's imagine how we can make this better in a positive way.
You know, we are talking about the prison system. Of course, this morning he was at the current Fromhold Correctional Facility, and it was really interesting to listen to the commissioner of the prison system presenting the chair made by the hands of the inmates themselves in their carpentry shop, saying that this chair represents the beauty and talent within us all. This is what the commissioner was saying to Pope Francis, Father Dan.
No, and that's the big theme for Pope Francis himself, this idea of beauty and truth and goodness. When he spoke off the cuff last night at the Festival of Families, and he talked about family, the words he kept repeating over and over again, a beauty, a truth, and a goodness. And he uses those three words very often in all of his addresses, because he's actually a big believer in this idea that God shares with us the full beauty, full truth, and full unity, and full goodness. And we can participate that. We might participate in that, maybe not in a perfect way by any means, because we're all imperfect. We all make our mistakes. But we can reflect that. And so he was asking us as family members, and even our struggles, to really reflect that beauty and that truth and that goodness. And that came through wherever he was, actually. But those are words he uses all the time, as you mentioned, you see.
You know, Father Dan, social media is so large now, and it's sort of a part of the way that we live. We've had a lot of our viewers tweeting about the Pope in Philly, and they get on our Facebook page and they Instagram pictures, and I think it's obviously a way to reach young people, and I know that Pope Francis has embraced this. I mean, he's on Twitter, and it's a way for him to really reach younger people that maybe wouldn't have reached before this, but he has embraced this social media.
He has, and in fact, he's become a dominant figure in social media. It's incredible, both on Twitter, Facebook. His first year, he was one of the highest trending topics, even on the internet itself. And I think part of it is he understands as a teacher, you've got to communicate in very clear ways the basics of what you need. You've got to invite people in a positive way, and that works with Twitter and Facebook. To be frank, I don't think he really reads Twitter or knows that much about it. He has, I think, some students who help him post his Twitter account. You know, he sends it over on a little piece of paper, and it goes out on Twitter. But I think the way he communicates is so clever and usually quite succinct and easy that it picks up great on social media, and people receive it and take it to heart.
However, you know, one of the things that he said today at the chapel was that social media can't take over your life. And I just think that was such a great, you know, remark, because so often we're stuck there on our phones and not interacting with everybody on a one-to-one personal level. And so the Pope is saying, don't let it take over your life.
No, and that's a big thing for him as well, that interpersonal. We can't lose sense of the interpersonal, and absolutely, Lizzie. He says we don't want to be superficial. We want to have some depth in our lives. So let's be careful that as we communicate in small bites and, you know, do whatever, 70 words or less, we nonetheless have meaningful encounters where we see ourselves as real persons, not just problems, not just numbers or statistics. He said that to Congress, and I think he's sincere when he said that to the bishops. Let's make sure we're not opting into a superficiality.
One of his tweets from February 14th, 2014, it says, "Dear young people, don't be afraid to marry. A faithful and fruitful marriage will bring you happiness," which brings us back, Father Dan, to what we touched on a little bit earlier today. When he was there in Lower Merion at St. Charles Borromeo, a seminary, he was talking about the mothers coming up to him crying, saying, "My son isn't married yet." And he goes, "And I say to them, shirts of 33-year-old men.
No, that's another great asset that he has. He's so practical. He gives real examples from real people's lives, partly because he interacts and he takes note of what people's struggles are. But he's absolutely right. You know, there's a way in which, and that's a big issue. It's honest to God, it is an issue where people can't afford to get married, or to pull all that together, or that everybody has all these kinds of pressures upon them. And I think he's acknowledging the reality of that, and yet at the time saying, at some point, have a little faith and take the chance and follow your heart. Follow your heart is something I think he wants to tell all of us.
And that's a way to reach younger people. And I've learned to change a little bit there, and I think that's one thing that, you hear young people talk about that. They'll say that, hey, did you see what Pope Francis said and what he tweeted? Because they follow him on Twitter.
Oh, it's unbelievable. And on campus, I get students coming up to me quoting Pope Francis, telling me what he just said. If we disagree on something, you'll say, well, here's what Pope Francis says, as if though they're personal friends, and that, Father, you need to pay attention to what Pope Francis is telling you. So sometimes it's often about the environment. You know what Pope Francis says about the environment? Well, here's what should happen on recycling at St. Joseph's University. And I said, well, how can I argue with Pope Francis and you? You're both on the same page.
Really? It's interesting. Here's a 78-year-old man, 78 years old, and we were listening to one of the band members, Father Dan, from the Cardinal O'Hara High School band, and they were saying, he's just such a modern guy. I love that.
You know what, Lucy? I think he's such an old guy that he's modern. I don't know. It kind of comes full circle for him. Honest to God, because he's very much himself. He's someone from another generation, and he's this. He's like your favorite uncle. That you just sit at the kitchen table and talk with. But social media and his presence in the media on television comes across in that avuncular, familiar way, and it just works with the media that we have. This high-tech media communicates what I would call an old-fashioned familiarity with this Pope that's just works perfectly for leadership, to be honest.
Well, he exudes youth. He exudes energy, and very soon here it's going to be Wheels Up. I don't know whether you're watching the monitor. I assume that you are, Father Dan,
sure.
But Shepherd 1 about to take flight.
And it's about to go. And again, this is obviously the end of this historic meeting to the U.S. And I'll just give a quick reflection on what it means for me. I mean, obviously, 2.5 years ago, I was in Rome when, Pope Francis was elected, and they received Shepherd 1 is Wheels Up. So 2.5 years ago, I was in St. Peter's Square, and I felt the energy of this new Pope. We didn't know a whole lot about him, to be frank. We learned that he was the first Pope from Latin America. He was the first Jesuit Pope, and we have seen over the last 2.5 years how he has been an inspiration and has really transformed the world. And his message of inclusion and love and mercy has touched everybody, not just Catholics, but a lot of people. And for me, it's been interesting to have followed him from the beginning. I mean, when I was over there in Rome, he was not one of the favorites to become the Pope. And I said everyone was trying to handicap this race, and no one thought that this man would become Pope. And so I think a message that speaks to me is that this man has really transformed the world, and no one thought that he was going to be Pope. And I really love his message of mercy and inclusion.
No, you're right, and in fact, when he was before he was elected, they had these little speeches they give to the whole conclave fathers, and he had 5 minutes. He gave a 3.5-minute speech, and apparently what he said about the renewal of the church moving forward with a gospel of joy and a church of mercy and compassion, apparently that